Like a grand and miraculous spaceship, our planet has sailed through the universe of time.
Like a grand and miraculous spaceship.
Grand and miraculous.
Grand and miraculous.
I think with the Muppets, there's sort of an innocence to them, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that appeals to the child in everybody. Because I think everybody is a child still.
Well, we all want to build a time machine, Doc. So when you enter Disneyland, you're entering a time machine.
I only hope that we never lose sight of one thing, that it was all started by a mouse.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 31, Grand and Miraculous. I'm very happy you're here. I heard through the grapevine that YouTube may have had some tech issues today, so hopefully we have none of that tonight. But yeah, we're going to have a fun episode tonight. Just to cue it up a little bit, I wanted to let you know that, we've left Disney property before on this show, of course. If you may remember, we took a live visit to the Space Needle. We've talked about a few other things, but we've never actually rated a non-Disney attraction like this. We've never put something outside the Disney universe through our full analysis, immersion, storytelling, and delight until today. Today, Grand and Miraculous is covering the Universal Studios Hollywood Studio Tour, and I want to tell you why. To understand themed entertainment, you have to understand where it began. And contrary to what you might assume, it didn't begin in Anaheim, California on July 17th, 1955. I know, blasphemy. It didn't begin with Walt Disney's dream of a clean, family-friendly amusement park. It actually began 40 years earlier on a converted chicken ranch in the San Fernando Valley with an immigrant who arrived in America unable to speak a word of English. So today we're going to trace a line through 110 years of history. We'll follow a German cattle dealer, his son who fought Thomas Edison, and he won. A Cleveland theater usher. He became the most powerful man in Hollywood. And a Disney legend who designed the monorail and built a giant gorilla for Universal. 3 men, 3 eras, 1 revolutionary idea. What if we let everybody in? This is Grand and Miraculous. I'm your host, John, aka Spaceship Ears, and this is the story of the world's longest running studio tour. I'm so grateful that you're here. Let me pop over to chat and say hi to some good folks. Mr. Dave is in the house. Hello, Dave. Hope you're doing great. Beaker and Honeydew is always here to wish us well. I'm so grateful for all of you. Let's see. Debbie Bernfeld is here. Hello, Debbie. Lamons is in the house. Hopefully we get that issue sorted out. Can't Kate. No, I'm kidding. Let's see. Jason Thibodeau. Hey, Jason. Hope you're doing fantastic. Miss K's in the house. And Dad. Hope you're doing great. Thanks for being here and supporting me. Miss Udalali Lane. Speaking of trouble. Thanks for being here. Let's see. Scroll. Monorail Molly's in the house. Hello, Jen. Hope you're doing fantastic. Thanks for the support. And I saw Pete McDevitt in here. Hey, Pete. Hope you're doing great. Thanks for supporting us here. Nico the Greco's in the house. Hey, Nico. Hope you're doing fantastic. And scroll. I think I got everybody. Yes, and I see Lamont's back in the chat. Sounds good. So in case this is the first time you've seen our show, this is our mission statement, is to unveil the magic behind theme park attractions, exploring their creators, their immersive worlds, and the moments that keep us coming back with your voice shaping the journey. As always, I like to start things off with a little trivia, and of course, tonight's no exception. Tonight's trivia is kind of interesting. In the original 1915 Universal City Tour, what did Carl Laemmle, the gentleman that you see right here, what did he encourage audience members sitting in the bleachers to do during filming? Now, this would be something that would be completely unthinkable today. But what do you think that was? And I'd like you to share memories in chat, too. If you have any memories of the original Universal Studios tour in Hollywood, please do share them. Even if you have memories of the attractions I got transplanted to Florida, share those, too, because some of those were better. We're not going to cover Florida much tonight, but we'll talk about their roots for sure. And of course, I'd like to encourage you to go to our website, www.grandandmiraculous.show. Tonight's code is TRAM. Not very original, but it works. TRAM. And you can contribute your voice as well to everybody else's voice. I love seeing everybody's reactions and their votes a few days after the show. It's great to see those votes coming in. And sometimes I'm surprised, you either vote higher or lower than I do. And that's great. That's like I always say, I'm just one voice out of many. So I'm really grateful for your contributions here. A personal note. Thank you for dealing with the 1 week delay. I had a little bit of an accident last Saturday being clumsy, but I'm doing much better now. I'm so grateful for everybody who reached out and wished me well. Everything's on the mend, and I'm able to talk to you tonight for an hour, so I'm excited about that. Let me pop over to chat to see if anybody else is in the house. I think we got everybody. If I missed you, please holler, and I'll come get you, call you out in a bit. Okay, let's head back to our story. All right. So this is Carl Laemmle. This is a gentleman that we'll be talking about quite a bit tonight. And the reason is this was his beginnings. He was born on January 17th, 1867, way back then in Laupheim, a small town in the kingdom of Württemberg, Germany. He was a 10th of 13 children. Imagine that. His father was a small-time cattle dealer and land agent. Now, he wasn't wealthy, but he was very respectable and he had a good reputation. Now, when Carl was 13 years old, his mother died. It was the first huge loss of his life, but unfortunately not the last. At 17, he made a decision that would change the course of entertainment history. On February 14th, 1884, which happened to be Valentine's Day, which we just celebrated, Carl Laemmle arrived in America. Now, he had $50 in his pocket, steamship tickets from his father, and he couldn't speak a lick of English. Of course, he came to Ellis Island. He settled with relatives. He learned the language. He got a job as a bookkeeper in Chicago. And for the next 20 years, that's what he did. Bookkeeping, numbers, ledgers. And all along that time, while inside him, something was waiting to be born. Think about that for a second. 20 whole years. 20 years of patience, 20 years of watching, 20 years of dreaming as a new immigrant to our country. Well, at age 39, Carl Laemmle opened his first Nickelodeon, a small theater showing short films for 5 cents each. And everything changed at that moment. Well, there was one other person in the way. You may have heard of his name, this gentleman. There was a problem in the movie business in 1906. Actually, there were many problems, but they all had the same source, this gentleman, Thomas Edison. Now, Edison, of course, had created what was called the Motion Picture Patents Company. It was known to everybody in the industry as the Trust. The Trust controlled everything. They owned the patents on cameras and projectors. They controlled film distribution. Well, long story short, if you wanted to make movies in America, you paid Edison's trust, or you flatly didn't make movies in Hollywood. Now, independent filmmakers faced lawsuits, equipment seizures, sometimes violence. The trust had enforcers. Edison truly played hardball. But Carl Laemmle, he didn't come to America to be bullied. He didn't spend 20 years as a bookkeeper to have his dreams controlled by a monopoly. He became the leader of the, quote, independents, the rebels fighting the trust. He sued back when Edison sued him. He publicly mocked the trust, in fact, in trade papers. A small immigrant from Germany standing up to the most famous inventor in America. And then, in 1910, Carl Laemmle did something even more radical. Now, before 1910, movie actors were anonymous. The studios didn't want them getting famous. Famous actors might demand more money, after all. Famous actors might have power. So the studios kept them nameless. The public knew them only by the studio they worked for example, the Biograph Girl or the Vitagraph Girl. Well, Carl Laemmle stole this lady, Florence Lawrence, from Biograph Pictures. And then he did the truly unthinkable. He publicized her. He planted, or at the very least exploited, a rumor that Florence Lawrence had been killed in a streetcar accident. And then he took out an ad in the trade papers calling the story a black lie and announcing that she was alive and making films for his studio, in fact. This was genius. Most people hadn't even heard the rumor. Now they knew her name. And then he sent her to appear in person at a theater in St. Louis, the first public star appearance in movie history. He, in fact, created the first movie star. The star system was born. Actors became celebrities. The entire economics of Hollywood shifted around. And the man who made it happen was a German immigrant who'd spent 20 years as a bookkeeper. In 1912, Laemmle founded a new company. He called it Universal because he wanted to make films with universal appeal. Not films for the elite, films for everybody. Well, on March 15th, 1915, Carl Laemmle opened Universal City on 230 acres of converted chicken ranch in the San Fernando Valley. 15,000 people came from all over the country and beyond. Now, there were some high-profile guests, too. For example, Thomas Edison himself, his former enemy, now vanquished, Buffalo Bill Cody. But the most important guests weren't the famous ones. They were the ordinary people, the families, the dreamers. Because Laemmle had a radical idea. Let them watch. For 25 cents, just a quarter, anybody could enter Universal City. For another nickel, you got a boxed chicken lunch. And they sat in bleachers, erected around the film sets, and watched movies being made. Now, they were encouraged to cheer the heroes, to boo the villains, to participate in the magic. This was possible because films were silent. No sound recording. Audience noise didn't matter. 5 productions could be filming simultaneously on the massive main stage. There was a zoo, in fact, with elephants and camels. There was an open-air carnival-like atmosphere. 500 guests came every day. Universal produced over 250 films that year alone. What was once reserved for the privileged, access to the Dream Factory, was now a mass market product. For 30 cents, anybody could see how movies were made. Well, you probably know the story. In the late 1920s, everything changed. Talkies arrived. Movies with synchronized sound. Now, if you've seen Singin' in the Rain, one of my favorites, you know the chaos that sound brought to Hollywood. But at Universal City, this impact was more specific and more devastating. Sound recording required absolute silence. There were no more cheering crowds, no more bleachers, no more audience participation. The zoo was closed Animal sounds were verboten. The gates to Universal City swung shut. What one Universal creative director calls the dark decades began. The model Laemmle created would wait a whole 35 years to return. Now, in 1936, Carl Laemmle lost control of Universal. He had been too generous. He had been lending money to struggling filmmakers, putting dozens of relatives on a payroll, probably where nepotism started. Well, Uncle Carl, they called him, and the nickname was both affectionate and rueful. But here's what you should know about Carl Laemmle, something often overlooked. In histories of Hollywood, during the 1930s, as the Nazis rose to power in Germany, Carl Laemmle used his wealth and influence to bring hundreds of Jewish refugees to America. He signed affidavits guaranteeing their financial support. He saved their lives. The man who democratized Hollywood, the man who opened the gates, he did far more than make movies. Well, on September 24th, 1939, Carl Laemmle died in Beverly Hills. He was 72 years old. He never saw his tour revived. The dream of public access to filmmaking died with him. But there were seeds that remained in the soil. They would wait for a new gardener. Lew Wasserman. Lew Wasserman was born in Cleveland, Ohio on March 22nd, 1913, the same year Laemmle was building his independent studio empire. Now, Wasserman's father was retired and poor. The family had nothing at all. At 20 years old, Lew Wasserman got a job as a theater usher. He stood in the back of movie palaces and he watched them play night after night. But his attention wasn't on the screen. It was on the audience. He was watching audiences react, learning what made them laugh and gasp and cry. Now, he couldn't afford a seat himself, but from the back of the house, he could see something the audience couldn't, their own faces. He studied what worked. He memorized what didn't work. He was an outsider watching insiders have the time of their lives, and he was taking notes. Then he got a different kind of job. He became a publicity agent for a Cleveland casino, a casino owned by organized crime. He hired musicians. He handled promotions. He learned how entertainment really worked. At that casino, Wasserman met a man named Jules Stein. Stein was a former ophthalmologist, an eye doctor, who had started a company called MCA, the Music Corporation of America, and they booked bands. Well, Stein saw something in Wasserman. He hired him. By the 1950s, Lew Wasserman had transformed MCA from a band booking agency into the most powerful talent agency in Hollywood. Now, he represented the biggest stars. He made deals no one else could make. In 1950, he negotiated a profit-sharing deal for James Stewart on Winchester 73. This was the first time an actor could share in a film's profits. It changed Hollywood economics forever. Now, Lew Wasserman had an astonishing facility for numbers as well. He could toil a column at a glance. He could follow a film's box office hour after hour on opening day and predict its total gross before the evening shows even started. Laemmle had been a bookkeeper, while Lew Wasserman thought like one. He was described as brilliant, relentless, and a visionary. He was also, like Carl Laemmle, an outsider, a Cleveland kid who started as an usher, another dreamer who saw opportunity where others saw barriers. Well, in the mid-1950s, something interesting started happening at Universal. Bus companies, Gray Line Tours, the same outfits that drove tourists past movie star homes, started bringing visitors onto the Universal lot. Now, this was a really informal arrangement. Universal charged a small fee, and the buses drove through. The tourists stopped for lunch at the studio commissary. And that was the key insight, hidden in plain sight. People would pay to see a working studio, even without bleachers, even without watching actual filming. Just driving through the backlot was enough for them. Well, in 1962, MCA, which was Wasserman's company, purchased Universal Studios. The studio commissary, in fact, was losing $100,000 a year, and Wasserman wanted to know what to do about it. His vice president, Albert Dorskind, found the answer at the farmers market in LA. He was there on a Saturday when he saw tourists filing off a Grey Line bus for lunch, and he had a brainstorm. Why not have tour buses drive through the Universal lot and stop at the commissary? He phoned the president of Grey Line that afternoon, and just like that, Universal Studio was a tourist attraction again. The idea of the Hollywood theme park was born, as one Universal historian puts it, from selling commissary lunches. And here's the echo that gives me chills. Both Carl Laemmle in 1915 and Lew Wasserman in 1964 started with food sales, the chicken lunch, the commissary meal. Two outsiders, 49 years apart, realizing that you could fund public access to the Dream Factory through the simple act of selling lunch. Well, on July 15th, 1964, 9 years after Disneyland opened, but 49 years after Laemmle's original tour, the Universal Studio Tours officially launched. Now, the ticket price was $2.50 for adults, $1.25 for children. The tour lasted 90 minutes, and it ran 5 times daily. Now, the vehicles themselves were called glamour trams, candy-striped, red and white, with ruffled awnings. They were designed by this man. We've talked about him before, Harper Goff, a Hollywood art director whose credits included 20,000 Leagues and later Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Well, the experience included a makeup demonstration, a costume display, a 2-man stunt show, and a drive through the outdoor film sets. Halfway through, guests stopped for lunch at the commissary. Now, this is a look at the early tour plaza with the trams going through. In the first year, 38,184 guests took the tour. These are modest beginnings, of course, but the dream was reborn. Now, something unexpected happened with the tour guide position. This kind of became Hollywood's de facto apprenticeship program, in fact. The early guides included John Ford III. He was a grandson of the legendary director, and Dan Milland, son of actor Ray Milland. But they weren't just celebrity offspring. The tour attracted aspiring filmmakers, writers, and performers. Future director John Badham, Saturday Night Fever, War Games, and things like that, he started as a tour guide. So did Michael Ovitz, who would go on to co-found CAA and become one of the most powerful executives in entertainment history. Today, 2,000 people apply for roughly 50 tour guide positions each year. They undergo intense 3-week training. They study a 260-page guide manual. They're tested on verbal skills, media usage, and written examination. Well, the tour guide became what it still is, a gateway into the industry. This was a way for outsiders to get inside. Carl Laemmle would have understood it perfectly. Now, the tour was working. Guests were coming, but a young executive named Jay Stein realized something. There were 2 uncomfortable truths that needed addressing. The first thing is you can't bank on guests seeing actors. Filming is unpredictable. Some days the lot's buzzed with activity, and on other days there was absolutely nothing going on. A guest who paid for the Hollywood experience might see absolutely no one famous. Second, studios aren't inherently entertaining. I'm sorry to break it, but they're just not. Empty sound stages are just big rooms at the end of the day. Backlots without any activity going on are just old buildings. The promise of see where movies are made only goes so far. Jay Stein's solution would define everything Universal theme parks became. Guarantee excitement with predictable, repeatable illusions. Don't rely on chance. Don't rely on an actor walking around. Create set-piece attractions that deliver every single time. Make guests feel like anything could happen while controlling everything. Laemmle's promise had been, come see the real thing. Stein's insight was that the real thing isn't always enough. You still let everybody in, but now you guarantee that they'll have something to see when they get there. This philosophy, guaranteed entertainment on a working lot, really became the foundation for Universal's entire theme park empire. Now, there were a few of these attractions added over time. In 1967, they added Prop Plaza, which was a Model T Ford mounted on a mechanical gimbal with a rotating cyclorama behind it. It was very simple, but it demonstrated a principle. You could simulate movie-making magic. In 1971, Flash Flood debuted. Now, the tram pauses next to a Mexican village set. Suddenly, 6,000 gallons of water cascade down a hillside, creating the illusion of a devastating flood. Now, this is still operating today. More than 55 years later, that same water crashes down the same hill. It's the longest continuously running attraction on the tour. And of course, 1973 brought Parting of the Red Sea, recreating the iconic moment from the Ten Commandments. 1974 added the collapsing bridge. 1975 brought the ice tunnel, where spinning walls and fake snow created the disorienting sensation of an avalanche. And then came 1976. The year before, Steven Spielberg's Jaws had become the biggest movie in history, the first summer blockbuster. Now, Universal owned Jaws, and they had a backlot where they could bring it to life. Well, Jaws Lake opened in 1976. The tour guide leads guests past what appears to be the quiet waters of Amity Harbor. Then, without warning, a shark fin rises. The mechanical great white lunges at the tram. The water turns blood red. John Williams' ominous score thunders from speakers. Now, it's still there today. Different sharks, of course, rebuilt and refurbished over the decades. But the same effect that made guests scream in 1976 still makes them scream in 2026. When you were visiting Universal Studios, you could purchase a VHS copy that would basically be a memory of the tour. I want to play the Jaws segment from that, if you'll indulge me for a moment.
Ah, Amity Island. The name sounds so pleasant. Things will surely be a little more peaceful here in this quiet village on the coast of New England. But I'd feel guilty if I didn't tell you that this is the town of Amity, which was terrorized by that ferocious great white shark in Jaws, one of the industry's all-time top moneymakers. We've been trying to catch the shark, but I'm afraid he's still here, somewhere. There he is. Hey, look out! It looks like we may be next.
Do you remember the famous scene from Back to the Future Part 2 where Marty McFly gets scared by a Jaws hologram? He says, it still looks fake. Well, fake or not, it's kind of an icon of the park, and everybody who visits it remembers it. Well, in 1979, the Battle of Galactica opened, and this was inspired by the Battlestar Galactica TV series. It was the first themed attraction to feature audio animatronic characters outside a Disney park. Think about that for a moment. That's a huge milestone. Universal wasn't just shooting movies anymore. It was building worlds, and it invited you into these worlds. And then there's the Psycho House. Alfred Hitchcock built it, of course, for his 1960 masterpiece. Janet Leigh's character found more than she bargained for when she stopped at a tiny motel with 12 rooms and 12 vacancies, run by a very odd man named Norman Bates. Well, this house has been on the tour since 1964, one of the very first sets guests could see. It's been dismantled and rebuilt over the years, moved slightly up a hill, given a pink paint job for a Chevy Chase movie in 1981, restored to its original ominous appearance, while it remains the most photographed location on the back lot. In 2008, they added something new, a Norman Bates character who's frequently seen hanging around the property. Looking at the trams, looking at the guests, some visitors don't notice him at all. Some find him deeply unsettling. The Psycho House demonstrates what makes the studio tour unique. Now, this isn't a recreation. It's not a tribute. It's the actual house from the actual movie on the actual lot where it was filmed. Real history, real Hollywood. Let me take a brief time out and I will pop over to chat because I saw some lovely people come in. K.E. loves Disney. Hello, Kate. Hope you're doing fantastic. I saw Miss Dame Dystopia pop in. Hello, Dame. Karen Desert Girl 60. Hello, Karen. Hope you're doing fantastic. Let's see. I saw Sierra pop in. Cruising Theme Park Guide. Hello, Sierra. Thanks for being here. I see Jason. I think I said hello. Nico the Greco. I think I said hello to you. I think we're all caught up. If I missed you, I will get back to you. Please holler. Okay. Now, we need to talk about Bob Gurr. Everybody knows and loves this gentleman, Bob Gurr, because his story bridges the company we usually cover on this show with the one we're covering today. Now, as you know, Bob Gurr was born in 1931 in LA. In 1954, he was hired by Wed Enterprises, the company that would become Walt Disney Imagineering. He worked directly with Walt Disney on the original Disneyland. Today, Bob Gurr is the only remaining original Imagineer among those assigned by Walt to design Disneyland in 1954. The only one still alive. Think about what this man designed. The Autopia cars, those miniature vehicles that everybody loves for 70 years. The Disneyland monorail, the first daily operating monorail in the Western Hemisphere. The Matterhorn bobsleds, the Main Street vehicles, and Abraham Lincoln. He built the animatronic Lincoln for the 1964 World's Fair. For just a moment, that mechanical man was alive. He was named a Disney legend in 2004. He retired from Disney in 1981 after 27 years of creating magic, but he wasn't finished. In 1986, Universal called. They had an idea. They wanted the biggest, most complicated, complex animatronic figure ever built. They wanted this guy, King Kong. Well, Bob Gurr, Disney legend, creator of the monorail and Lincoln, he designed Universal's King Kong. The figure stood 30 feet tall. It weighed 7 tons. It was computer controlled with movements more sophisticated than anything attempted before. Now, this experience was truly terrifying. The tram entered an enclosed building, themed to look like a New York City street. Without warning, Kong appeared, enormous, angry, reaching for the vehicle. The tram shook. Guests screamed. Now, King Kong encounter cost $7 million. It transformed the studio tour from a pleasant backlot drive into a world-class attraction. It proved that Universal could compete with Disney in the animatronic arts, and it meant that the gates opened wider. More people came, more people screamed, more people left believing that they've seen something impossible, and it was designed by a Disney legend. Let's play a little bit of video so for those of you who haven't been on it can remember. Now, this was a heck of a lot more intense than just going past some facades and some sound stages. So it was a big deal at the time. And some of you may remember, yes, as you went past him, you could smell the banana breath on him, which was a nice touch. Kong was designed by a Disney legend. Now think about what that means. Bob Gurr didn't care about corporate rivalries. He cared about making magic. He cared about pushing the boundaries of what mechanical figures could do. When Universal offered him a challenge, build the biggest animatronic ever, he said yes. The best creators don't stay in one corporate silo. They go where the interesting problems are. If you'll forgive me for being nepotistic a little bit, my own father, John DeCure Jr., designed Spaceship Earth at Epcot before crossing over to art direct Ghostbusters and production design Top Gun. That just goes to prove that the magic follows the maker, not necessarily the company. Now, in 1989, the tour added Earthquake, the big one. Your tram enters a San Francisco subway station. Then an 8.3 magnitude earthquake completely strikes while you're not expecting it. The ground shakes violently, supports collapse, water floods into the station. Now, Earthquake is still operating today. It's refurbished and enhanced for the tour's 60th anniversary. Now, by this point, the tour had truly arrived. It wasn't just a backlot drive anymore. It was a collection of world-class attractions threaded together by a tram ride through a working studio. Nothing like it existed anywhere else in the world. June 1st, 2008. I have to talk about this date. Early morning, before dawn. The lot was empty. The sets were dark. A worker had been applying asphalt shingles to a facade on the back lot. Now, to warm the shingles, he had used a blowtorch. When his shift ended, he left. He didn't check whether all the spots had cooled. They hadn't. There was a 3-alarm fire. Flames consumed building after building. Firefighters worked through the night, but the damage was catastrophic. King Kong Encounter, represented in this box at the bottom, it was destroyed completely. Bob Gurr's masterpiece gone in a single night. Courthouse Square, the set from Back to the Future, where Marty McFly raced the DeLorean to catch lightning. 2 sides of the square burned beyond repair. You can see them here across from the courthouse. New York Street, the heart of the backlot, it suffered extensive damage. There's the courthouse. And here's a view of the damage to the area. Everything in red is gone. Now down in the lower right corner, you see the video vault. It was destroyed. 40,000 to 50,000 archived digital video and film copies. Completely gone. But the worst loss, it wasn't revealed for 11 whole years. In 2019, the New York Times published an investigation that stunned the music industry. The 2008 fire had actually destroyed a warehouse called Music Masters, and Universal had never disclosed what was inside. Well, they were master recordings, irreplaceable original tapes. Louis Armstrong, Buddy Holly, John Coltrane, Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, thousands more, gone, burned, unrecoverable. The biggest disaster in the history of the music business, one industry historian called it. And Universal had kept it quiet for more than a decade. Now, I tell you this not to criticize Universal, although, they deserve criticism for the cover-up, but because it's part of this story. The fire didn't just destroy a theme park attraction. It destroyed pieces of American cultural heritage that can never be replaced. And it destroyed Bob Gurr's King Kong, the man who built Lincoln, who designed the monorail, who proved that the best creators work across company lines. His greatest post-Disney achievement reduced to ash. For 22 years, Kong had reached for those trams. 22 years of guests screaming. 22 years of kids gripping the armrests, wide-eyed, experiencing something impossible. It was all gone in a single night. Now, Bob Gurr, of course, is still alive as I record this. Hopefully he has a good long life ahead of him. He's 94 years old. He hosts visitors at his house in Tujunga, showing other people his memorabilia, telling stories about Walt and Disneyland and all the magic he created. Now, his King Kong is gone, but the philosophy endures. Build something spectacular. Push the boundaries. Make people believe, for just a moment, in the impossible. Well, on July 1st, 2010, just 2 years after the fire, Universal reopened the King Kong attraction, but it wasn't a rebuilt animatronic. They couldn't simply remake what Bob Gurr had created. So what they did was that they partnered with Peter Jackson, director of the 2005 King Kong remake. They created King Kong 360 3D, a massive screen experience where Kong battles prehistoric creatures while your tram seems to hang in the balance. Now, it's different from the original. There's no physical animatronic lunging at your vehicle, but it's still pretty spectacular. The 3D effects are immersive, Kong still threatens, and guests still scream. But, you can't create what was lost, but you can build something new. Now, the tour in 2025 includes Flash Flood, still operating, Earthquake, refreshed, Jaws, the shark still lunges. And they added some new features too. The War of the Worlds crash site, a real Boeing 747 purchased for $60,000 and transported to Universal for $2 million. It was left exactly as it appeared in Spielberg's 2005 film. The Psycho House, of course, and Bates Hotel. Norman is still hanging around. And this, Jupiter's Claim, the Western theme park set from Jordan Peele's film Nope, added in 2022. This was the most recent addition to the tour. And King Kong 360 3D, the digital heir to Bob Gurr's animatronic masterpiece. Now I need to start talking about this man, John Murdy. He started as a tour guide, in fact, in 1989. Today, he's the creative director of Universal Studios Hollywood. In 2000, he led a major refurbishment of the tour. He added LCD screens and DVD players to the trams, what he called creating a movie theater on wheels. The screens show film clips corresponding to the locations you're passing. It really transformed the educational aspect of the tour. Now, Murdy is also the architect of something very popular in the community, Halloween Horror Nights, the annual event that transforms Universal into a maze of terror. He understands that Universal's identity is inseparable from movies, and that the studio tour is the beating heart of that identity. Now he's carrying the torch forward, another generation of dreamers inheriting the vision. In 2024, Universal celebrated the tour's 60th anniversary. They reissued trams painted in the original candy-striped glamour tram colors. They displayed historic artifacts. They refreshed the Earthquake attraction. And they announced something else. All 21 trams were being converted from diesel hydraulic to electric. Lower emissions, less noise, technology of the future meeting the legacy of the past. And in March 2025, there was a new announcement, Fast and Furious Supercharged, which has served as a tour finale since 2015, has closed permanently. In its place, Universal is building Hollywood Drift, a standalone roller coaster. Now the tour, as a result, it lost its grand finale. But if 110 years have taught us anything at all, it's that the tour is never truly finished. A new ending will come, of course. And that's a lesson of the last 110 years. Carl Laemmle's bleachers became Wasserman's glamour trams, became Peter Jackson's 3D screens. The technology changes. The principle doesn't. Let people in. So, we've traced the story of letting people in, from bleachers to glamour trams to 3D screens. The question is now, what do they find when they get there? Now, I want to be clear about something right off the bat. The Universal Studios Hollywood Studio Tour is not trying to be Disney. It's doing something completely and fundamentally different. Now, Disney creates immersive fantasy worlds. You walk through Sleeping Beauty Castle, and you're in a fairy tale. You enter Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, and you're in the Star Wars universe. The goal is total transformation to another reality. Well, Universal reveals the world behind worlds. You're not in the movie. You're seeing where the movie was made, how the magic works. The actual house from Psycho, the actual crash site from the War of the Worlds. Now, both approaches are completely valid. Both create joy, but they're different. And I need to rate the studio tour on its own terms. We start with immersion. For immersion, I'm giving the studio tour a 7 out of 10. Now, this is a working studio. The sets are real, but they're not always dressed. You might see desperate housewives. Colonial Street might look like a generic suburb because nothing is filming there at the moment. You might pass empty sound stages. The attractions within the tour are King Kong, Earthquake, Jaws. They're highly immersive. When the shark lunges at your tram, well, some of us believe it. But when the subway collapses around you, you certainly believe that. But the connective tissue, the backlot itself, is kind of hit or miss. On a good day, you might see actual filming. But on most days, you see beautiful facades that are clearly facades. And that's the paradox of the working studio. The authenticity is both the strength and the limitation. You're seeing the real thing, which means you're seeing it as it really is, but not as fantasy would present it. Now, for storytelling, I'm also giving the studio tour a 7 out of 10. The tour doesn't tell a single narrative the way a Disney dark ride does. There's no beginning, middle, and end. You're not following a protagonist through an adventure. Instead, the tour tells the story of filmmaking itself. Each stop is a chapter in Hollywood history. The Psycho House, the Jaws Lake, the backlot where 1,000 productions have been filmed over a century. Now, the guide serves as a narrator. The LCD screens provide context, but it's an anthology, not a novel, a series of connected vignettes rather than a single story. For what it's attempting, it absolutely works. You leave understanding something about how movies are made. You've touched real history. The tour itself doesn't tell the kind of deep emotional story we celebrate on this series, but the history behind it instead, as we've seen tonight, is among the most compelling that we've covered. And finally, for delight, I got to give it an 8 out of 10. There's a specific joy in recognition. That's the Psycho House. That's where Marty McFly drove the DeLorean. And hey, that's the shark from Jaws. The tour traffics in recognition, and it delivers consistently. Guests light up when they see locations that they know from films that they love. The set pieces deliver genuine thrills. King Kong is spectacular. Earthquake makes your heart pound. And Jaws still has the power to make people jump, even though it's a rubber shark. And there's a deeper delight of being let behind the curtain. For decades, Hollywood was closed to ordinary people. The studio tour says, come on in, see how it works. Demystify the magic by revealing it. And that's a profound delight. That's a joy of access. So taking the geometric mean as we do, I give it a final score of 7.32 out of 10. Now that's a strong score. It places a tour among the better attractions we've covered here. Of course, not at the very top like Pirates or Haunted Mansion, but solidly in the upper tier. And I think that's right. Studio Tour is a very unique achievement. Nothing else like it exists in the world. Of course, Disney had their own version in Hollywood studios, but it didn't hit the same way this one did. This was a real working studio, open to the public, with world-class attractions woven through it. The longest continuously operating studio tour in history. And it's not trying to be Disney. It's being Universal. And at that, it succeeds magnificently. Now, I want to return to where we started. Back to a German immigrant who arrived in America unable to speak English. Carl Laemmle fought Thomas Edison's monopoly. He invented the star system. He opened Hollywood's gates to ordinary people. He charged 25 cents and a nickel for a chicken lunch, and he let the world watch movies being made. He lost control of his company. He died before the tour was revived. But he also saved hundreds of Jewish refugees from Nazi Germany, signing affidavits that guaranteed their survival. The 25-cent chicken lunch is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. Think about that for a moment. Universal Destinations and Experiences operates theme parks across the globe, and it all traces back to a man who asked, what if we let everybody in? In 1986, MCA threw a party for Lou and Edie Wasserman's 50th wedding anniversary. Now, they held it on the backlot on Courthouse Square, the set where Back to the Future had been filmed 2 years earlier. For one night, they dressed it up to look like Cleveland in 1936. The May Company store, the movie theater where a 20-year-old usher once stood in the back, watching other people's joy and taking notes. The kid who couldn't afford a seat now owned the lot, and he'd opened the gates so everybody else could get in too. And I think about Bob Gurr, especially Bob Gurr's hands. Those same hands that sculpted Lincoln's face for the World's Fair, the figure that made audiences believe a machine was alive. Those same hands, 22 years later, built a 30-foot gorilla for a rival studio. Now, that's not disloyalty. That's what artistry looks like. The magic of themed entertainment has never belonged to one company. It belongs to the people who make it, and they carry it with them wherever they go. 110 years since Carl Laemmle's vision. 60 years since Lou Wasserman's glamour trams began rolling. 200 million guests, not 200 years, 200 million guests and counting. Now the technology changes. Bleachers became trams, became LCD screens, became 3D experiences. But the core idea is the same as it was in 1915. What if we let everybody in? The studio tour remains the only attraction of its kind in the world. Not a fantasy, not a simulation, a real working studio, and it's open to everybody. Now, at the beginning of the episode, I asked a trivia question. In the original 1915 Universal tour, what did Carl Laemmle encourage audience members in the bleachers to do during filming? Something that would be completely unthinkable today. Well, I mentioned it earlier, cheer the heroes and boo the villains while scenes were being filmed. This was possible because silent films didn't record audio, so audience noise didn't interfere with production. Once again, I'd like to encourage you to go to www.grandandmiraculous.show and cast your vote as well. The code tonight is Tram, TRAM. Please cast your vote and let us know what you think, because I love to see the votes afterwards. Now, this entire episode, we've talked about letting people in, onto the backlot, onto the tram, into the spectacle. But there was a moment where Universal went further than anyone had thought possible. They didn't just let you onto the lot. They didn't just let you ride past the sets. They let you into the movie itself. 1991, a building with no windows. Inside was an 8-story IMAX screen, the largest ever built for a theme park. A ride vehicle shaped like a DeLorean, and a filmmaker named Douglas Trumbull, the visual effects genius behind 2001: A Space Odyssey and Blade Runner. He had spent years trying to answer a single simple question. What if you didn't just watch Marty McFly travel through time? What if you went with him? Well, the result is the most technologically ambitious simulator ride the world had ever seen. It changed what theme parks could be. It made grown adults weep when it closed. And its story was the story of the people who built it, the impossible problems they solved, and the legacy they left behind is one of the greatest theme park stories ever told. Back to the Future, the ride. We'll cover that next week on Grand and Miraculous. Now we close as we always do with words from Ray Bradbury. Gather round the great next campfire. Let us seek and know and understand and dream a new book, a new instruction book to fly great spaceship Earth through the uncharted seas of the future world. Lock in a dream that is your own, find what truth is in your blood, and beat a path from here to there. Your life is yours to own and be. The world is yours to shape and change. The stars are yours as just reward. Now, Carl Laemmle, of course, locked into the dream that was his own. A boy from Germany who found what truth was in his blood, the magic of moving pictures, And he beat a path from Laupheim, Germany to Hollywood. He shaped the world by opening the gates. Lou Wasserman walked into his dream, a Cleveland usher who couldn't afford a seat, standing in the back of the house taking notes. He shaped the world by reviving what had been lost, and then he threw a party on the back lot to prove it. And Bob Gurr, in 94, he's still locked into his dream, still telling stories, still proving that the best creators follow the interesting problems wherever they lead. Your life is yours to own and be. The world is yours to shape and change. The stars are yours as just reward. And the gates, well, keep them open. Uncle Carl would have wanted it that way. Good night, everybody.